Well, thanks, Charles, for being here and joining us.
Yeah, thank
Really,
you for inviting me, Brian.
really appreciate it. When I was looking at your essays today and kind of looking over your work more closely, and what I feel is like this. Um, to me, it feels like it comes from the non-dual realization. Like it comes from this realization inside yourself that everything is, to use an overused term, everything is one. Everything is of the same essence. Everything is divine. And then what I love about what you're doing is there's the sense of like what you're writing about and you're speaking about feels like to me is how does that non-dual realization, how does it express itself socially, culturally, politically? How does it express itself, in this world? And the integration of the two feels like it's at the heart of the work that you're doing. So I guess my first question is, does that feel like that's accurate way of articulating what you're doing?
Maybe if you stretch it a bit,
Hmm.
I don't usually think in terms of oneness, but more of interbeing.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's not that necessarily that you and I are one,
Hmm.
because in some sense we're obviously two,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but there's definitely something that we have in common.
Yeah.
Uh, Maybe we're on some level the same God consciousness inhabiting a different vantage point.
Right.
Um, and also, another way I think about it is that there's something of you and me, and something of me and you, and
Right.
something of any being is also part of me. But it's not that I am identical with that tree out there. It's having its experience. I'm having my experience.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know, because like I've met people who are like really, really steeped in non-dual teachings,
Yeah.
and um, they kind of succumb to like a this kind of passivity,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they stop making discriminations and categories and
Right.
thinking. And I
Right.
know one woman who was worked with Adi Da, no, not Adi Da, what's his name?
Ayashanti.
Adi Ashanti for a long time,
Hmm.
and she eventually, I mean, she, has nothing bad to say about him, but at some point she was like, I want to start like thinking again. I want to start using, my discriminating mind and
Yeah.
analyzing, and
Yeah.
I want to do that.
Yeah.
So I guess I might say that there's plenty of time for non-dual consciousness after I'm dead, but right now I'm in this one.
Well, that's exactly where I was going, is like you're really the only person I see that it feels like you're um rooted in the sense of interbeing, the sense of everyone's of the same essence, but we're also diverse and we're also unique. But you're bringing that into the most dualistic places, right? The political being probably the most dualistic of all in the cultural, social, the culture wars and all of these things. So I just love that you're doing that. And kind of because it feels like those areas in a way they're our greatest teachers to realize this truth. And you're right, like these non-dual teachers, everyone that I know, they seem to avoid those realms altogether, or I've seen a few that go in there, but then they go in this like really unconscious kind of triggered space and they kind of lose their their awareness. So I think it's yeah, I think it's I think it's great that you're doing that and you're going in those areas and shining the light in those areas in that way. So speaking of which, so few years ago, what 2, 3 years ago, you joined RFK's campaign. And I'd love to hear like what that was like for you, what that experience was like, what you learned, um, how what you came
Mhm.
away from it with.
Well, at the beginning, I was very inspired and very hopeful.
Yeah.
Uh, at the initial campaign meeting, I mean, this was before he announced even, it was, I think, in April of 2023. I didn't really know any of these people. So I came in there, with a memo, a proposal. Here's what I think the campaign platform should be. Here's 5 themes 5 priorities that you should focus on, and here's the strategy to do it. I came in with a lot of stuff,
Hmm.
uh, and pretty much wrote the initial website, and I had stuff in there like, dismantle all 800 military bases and cut military spending in half, like
Uh-huh.
really radical.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, it got in there. I presume, Bobby, you read these things, or I'm, the culture of the campaign at that early point was open to very like things that are completely outside the Overton window of political
Uh-huh.
conversation. There was peace, civil liberties, because a lot of the energy from the campaign came out of COVID lockdowns and the suspension of civil liberties that happened under
Yeah.
COVID. Environment, economic fairness, restoring the middle class, and healing the divide in America. Those were the main themes, and I guess cleaning out corruption. And my heart was fully behind all of that, and I was like, wow. I never thought in my lifetime that there would be a major political candidate who'd be open to this way of thinking. And that was kind of I'd say the high point. And I wrote speeches for him, and there was a speech on peace that he made in that summer that really got a lot of attention. And then basically it all came crashing down. There were definitely some warning signs, but it really came crashing down in October of 2023 when he came out with a really hardline Zionist position on Israel and Palestine and Gaza, and that was very, very different than what I thought. And overall, the campaign just became more and more conventional. So I kind of got squeezed out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I stuck around for a long time thinking, well, he's better than the other guys.
Mm-hmm.
But my heart wasn't really in it anymore. But for a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of a possibility of that maybe still exists in the future of a unifying movement of the dispossessed of this country and I guess of this planet that bridges the left-right, liberal-conservative divide, and transforms this country and transforms the world. Like that embraces the things that I had brought in at the beginning. I still like because it really like set people on fire. People were really inspired. So it showed me something that is possible, even though the way it turned out was pretty heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. But now he's what's it called? HHS
Yeah,
director.
right.
So do you view that as because that's actually pretty extraordinary that he went
Yes.
from, writing the book about Fauci to now he's the
Yeah.
director of Health and Human Services.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, he's doing a lot of good things there. Uh, Although, it's. I mean, he's coming in, with maybe 60 other political appointees into an organization that has something like 70,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
It is a massive bureaucracy that kind of runs on autopilot, and
Yeah.
it's, hard to steer the Titanic.
Yeah.
So, but I think he's doing a lot of good things there. I'm not really, you know, involved with it. With this kind of thing, like either you're on the inside and you're working 15-hour days, or you're on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not, occasionally I'll do something for him kind of as a favor, but I'm not in government.
Yeah.
And
Not, yeah.
from what I've seen, I'm quite happy not to be working in some squat cubicle building in Washington.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of got connected. I mean, you seems like you kind of met a lot of the key players. And is it even darker than you thought it was, or what's your kind of impression of the belly of the beast, so to speak?
Mm. It's not darker than I thought it was. Than I thought it was.
Because you already
But it's
thought it was
pretty
so
dark.
dark.
Yeah, it's pretty dark.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. just the level of, corruption and ruthlessness,
Yeah.
and heartlessness
Hmm.
in both parties, in the politicians of both parties,
Hmm.
is just, sometimes makes me want to cry for the human race.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you wrote like I saw you wrote a essay. I don't know if it was directly about Trump, but I think it was really when you were talking about RFK, you talking about Trump, and you wrote about him, and I'd say probably maybe the most nuanced way that I've seen anybody write about him, like a very kind of balanced way of kind of just as best as you could objectively seeing certain, strengths and positives and then the
Yeah.
negatives and the weaknesses. And like it's what is it like this thing where like people have to like he's either Hitler or he's perfect, he do no wrong, and like why can't we
Yeah.
have something where we just like look at him like a normal human being and kind of in a nuanced way like that?
Yeah. Like that way of thinking, of uh, trying to understand the problems, the situation that we face, as being caused by some bad person or some bad group of people. That kind of us versus them thinking is why we're in this mess in the first place. So, there's plenty of good reasons to criticize Donald Trump, the things he said, the things he's done. But if you see him as this diabolical villain, you're not going to understand him. You're not even going to be able to oppose him very well on the things that you would like to oppose him because you don't understand him. You have
Now,
to, yeah,
Charles, I really think like it makes him stronger. Like that, it's you know what I mean. It's like the thing you focus on, whether you're for it or against it, you give it attention, it becomes stronger. This is what I
yeah,
see is wrong with the Democrats right now. Is they're just again everything's against Trump, against Trump, against Trump. But like,
right,
what are you for? What do you stand for? What are you trying to create in the world?
yeah, yeah. So um, unfortunately, both parties and their leaders bring us versus them thinking into a government with them, and once you've done that, then wars, for example, are inevitable. And really, fascism is inevitable. The whole basis of fascism is to create an us, that subsumes the individual into the state. And that us requires a them. So traditionally, it is either an oppressed minority of some sort, a dehumanized minority, the Jews, for example, that um, creates, in contrast, the us of fascism, or it's an external enemy. So fascism requires a them, but it also creates a them if there isn't one available. So, and I think that each party has strong fascistic tendencies and is blind to their own fascistic tendencies and well aware of those of the other party.
Hmm.
So there was like this big article in the New York Times I read a few days ago about um, uh, the threat to civil liberties under Trump and the threat of these AI tools, and so on and so forth. And it gave various examples. Didn't give any examples from the COVID lockdowns and the censorship and the surveillance and the contact tracing and all that stuff that in many countries was like pretty intense,
Forced vaccinations.
Yeah, it didn't even mention those things. So the way I see it, these technologies are kind of like the ring of power, in the Lord of the Rings, the One Ring, and a new political faction comes into power. And do they cast the ring into the fires, the cracks of doom, and destroy it, or do they keep it for themselves? And do they dismantle the security state? Do they dismantle the military-industrial complex and the intelligence services, the deep state, the surveillance state, the censorship industrial complex? Do they destroy these tools? No, they keep them around just in case they want to use them. And ultimately, they do use them.
Mm-hmm.
So, with Trump, it's not the unvaxxed, it's pro-Palestinian activists that are the on the business end of these tools. So, yeah.
What did you think of the DOGE thing? Because that they kind of articulated that like that was, and I guess it's kind of seems like it's out of the focus now. But it came initially. It was like we're gonna cut out the waste, the abuse, the fraud, which I was thinking what you were just mentioning would go into because it seems like the biggest issue is the intelligence agencies. It seems to me
Yeah.
is where
Yeah, I don't know.
The deep state as they call it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they did dismantle some parts of the deep state, defund, especially those parts of it that are sympathetic to the other faction. A lot of the agencies and organizations that were defunded were CIA front organizations that were used to maintain American imperial hegemony. And there was a lot of baby in that bathwater, a lot of really good programs that were doing good, that were like some of these funding freezes, they've devastated small organic farmers, they've devastated organizations working with the homeless, and doing really good humanitarian work. So that means that whatever side you're on, there is a lens available that can make Donald Trump look either like a hero or a devil. It depends on what you're looking at, and in a way, both are true. And because he's not coming in it with a story of compassion, this kind of collateral damage is inevitable. That when you bring us versus them thinking into something, then you're going to do a lot of harm, thinking the whole time that you're the hero doing a lot of good. Everybody, all of the worst dictators in history believed themselves to be in service to humanity.
What do you notice feels like there's like this really fascinating shift happening. I know that the left and right's not really a real thing, but culturally there's a divide in America. And there's this fascinating shift where it feels like there's this, for example, I'll give you the one I'm thinking of right now. So holistic wellness feels like it used to be kind of in the liberal left realm, and somehow it's like shifting to the conservative right realm. Are you
Yeah.
noticing this? And are you finding this fascinating and interesting? And I think the COVID thing really accelerated this.
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing inherently left or right about holistic wellness.
Mhm.
Left and right have become much more signifiers of group belonging than any coherent bucket for political philosophy. Because a lot of the beliefs that now are associated with the left, or at least the left-ish side of the spectrum, the Democrats, fit traditionally right-wing ideologies.
Mhm.
The Democrats have been, for the last 20 years at least, fully establishment. Serving the interests of Wall Street, the military, the intelligence services, large corporations, Wall Street. Did I mention Wall Street twice?
Yeah,
Yeah.
doubly
Uh,
important.
and representing the educated classes, the higher income people. And that used to be,
That's another shift.
yeah, I
Yeah, the
think
working class now are going to the
mostly
right.
Republican.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Um, so, who's left and who's right? I don't think that I think these terms are meaning less and less,
Mhm.
and really are just labels now for political factions.
Yeah. Well, a really stark contrast, probably the most stark contrast of all that I see is the the liberal Democrat. It's almost like fully an urban party now, where if you go in the rural areas, it seems like it's, dominated by
Yeah.
those are red areas.
But Brian, do we really need to talk about politics? Because I'm
No.
not really, that knowledgeable about it. And I feel like we're just kind of two guys, talking about what we don't know that much about. I mean, I know something about it, but I wasn't really prepared to have a political conversation today.
Well, you said you didn't understand AI,
Yeah,
so that must be something that
I was writing about that for the last couple of days.
yeah.
AI.
So what are you noticing there?
Well, that's too general a question.
Do you feel this is also general, but less general? Do you feel like AI can be a positive source, make a positive difference for our lives? Because it seems like there's a lot of negative potentialities.
Well, it's very convenient. I use it all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah, use it for gardening tips. I
yeah,
use it for
yeah,
recipes.
yeah,
I use it to sometimes to survey literature.
yeah.
Uh, to summarize long documents. I use it um, to fact check myself sometimes.
Mhm.
I was writing this essay, and I'm like, am I correctly using um, uh, the term transformer as I'm
Yeah,
writing about large language models,
yeah,
where I used it to explain some of the uh, mathematics behind pseudo random number generation, like that I needed to understand to write this.
mhm,
It's like having my own personal professor at my beck and call, with infinite patience anytime. It's
mhm,
incredible.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think it's like personally, it's very um, convenient. Now, because it saves me the trouble of reading extensively on some of these topics, then I don't have the experience of reading extensively on these topics and going through that process of sifting things out, and drawing connections and doing in days or weeks what AI can do in a minute. So it might actually debilitate me because
Yeah.
I don't practice these skills anymore. But I do, um, I am careful about what I use it for.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And are you concerned about like the long run of, so that's, where it's taking us as a society or socially, or do you see any potential pitfalls
Oh
in
yeah.
it?
I mean, oh sure. It's already causing a lot of damage
Yeah.
to individuals. People someone told me that some people are like so dependent on AI they'll like use it during conversations to help them articulate something. Like they'll like check their phone, check their AI in the middle of a conversation and then say that, and then at the end they don't even remember what they said because they weren't even doing the thinking. So I think that it'll like cause brain atrophy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
just
then
like
there's,
anything else. You use GPS and you stop. Not only do you not learn your area, but you lose the ability to learn any area.
mhm,
You use because you're outsourcing that to the machine. So if you outsource anything that you outsource to machines, you lose the ability to do. Even physical labor. When machines do the physical labor, the body gets weaker. When we invented writing and people started writing things down, they were outsourcing memory to technology, and their memories got less powerful. It used to be commonplace to be able to hear a long story or song or poem one time and be able to recite it verbatim. And now that's pretty rare. You outsource calculating arithmetic to calculators, and you can't do it in your head anymore. So when you outsource thought itself to AI, then does that mean you're not going to be able to think anymore? On the other hand, in some ways, yeah, like the invention of writing, say, made us stupider, but it also opened up new realms of thought and creativity. There are places that we can go now that we were not otherwise able to, and sublime works that would have not been available without literature. So I think that AI is the same, that it opens up tremendous creative possibilities and new applications of our brains. So yeah, there's both promise and peril in this technology. I mean, I think it's the most powerful, most significant technology, at least since the printing press, as far as the effect it'll have on society.
And then there's the question of who's programming AI, right? Are they?
Well, yeah, but no one really understands how it works. Like they understand, how it. I mean, on one level, then everyone understands how. I mean, technologists understand how it works. But if you say, okay, here I give it this prompt, why did it deliver this response? You can't. It's very difficult to, open up the innards of the program and follow the bits to explain why it reasoned out this answer. It's more of a it's because the weights in the neural network uh, 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 assigned higher probabilities to this sequence of words, and then the algorithm, the random, sampler sampled this one, and that's why. It's like a higher level explanation, but it's not actually, what was the inferential process that brought it from this prompt to this response? No one understands it any more than we understand why, I say the things that I say. You can give high level explanations. I'm saying it because, I have this set of beliefs, and you asked me and da da da. But you cannot say, well, it's because this neuron fired there, and then that one did that, and that one did that, and that's why. Like we don't have that much knowledge of actually what happens in the brain. And the same thing is with AI. So, in some really important sense, we don't know how it works. It's a black box.
Yeah, because the AI is a reflection of our knowledge and information, right? That's really, to me, that's all it is. So
Yeah.
we don't understand how we work, so we don't understand how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you feel is like because the phrase I think of you most is creating a more beautiful world, right? So what do you think is like the most essential things to focus on to bring it into being right now?
Mm. I would say there's many ways I could answer that. It's hard to answer such questions in the abstract. But I might say to reprogram our habits of judgment. That's kind of at the root of us versus them thinking. Judgment, I mean specifically the idea that if I were you, if I were so-and-so, I would not do as that person did. I would be different. If I were in the totality of your circumstances, if I were, Donald Trump, if I were Bill Gates, if I were in that person's shoes, I would do differently than they do because I'm better than them. Because I mean, I would like to think that if I were Bill Gates, I wouldn't do the things that he does. But do I really know that? If I had his childhood, if I had every influence that is bearing upon him, would I do any different? Would I do any different than the worst criminal in the world if I had had his childhood? As long as we believe that we're made of different stuff than those that we judge, we are wallowing in delusion. And the only hope to heal this world is to win a war against the bad people. Because they're just worse. They're just bad. That's not a realistic plan. In a war, the bad people will win. They're more ruthless.
That's a great point.
They don't care about collateral damage.
And that's kind of been human history, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My brother, who's a history buff, says that the history of the Roman Empire is the history of what happens when the bad guys win.
Mm-hmm.
So we need a different formula if we're going to have any authentic hope. And the formula is that the bad guys aren't bad guys after all. There's something in them, something in every human being that seeks to transcend the circumstances of separation, that seeks to move back toward wholeness, that seeks to heal, that seeks to be in service to life. And maybe in some people that's very, very deeply buried, very damaged. And maybe in this lifetime, it will never be expressed. And maybe there is nothing to do but to fight that person. But if that, but such people I think are rare. And again and again, I've encountered the very people who I would judge the most. And I mean, lots of people have this experience, Turns out that they're perfectly fine people. Executives at Monsanto, you might meet them and find, this is the nicest guy in the world, or at least no less nice than an executive at Greenpeace. So the theory that the reason that people do bad things is because they're bad people is generally not true. And when we recognize that, then we can ask new questions. Most importantly, what are the circumstances that are creating the bad behavior? What happened to you to make you become somebody who does this? How can I change those circumstances? It's a very different way of thinking.
And it feels like the stuff that triggers us, or we demonize in other people. I'm not the first one to say this, but it seems like those things exist inside ourselves, right? So,
yeah, right, because we're not really separate.
Yeah,
that's what we said at the beginning. There's something of you and me.
Yeah,
and anything I judge mirrors something in myself.
Yeah. So I say that to say that you could even be alone by yourself, meditating for a week and come up against these aspects of yourself. And if you can because there's this kind of idea that like if you're sort of an inward looking person, you're not doing anything, but I think actually you can be doing a lot, because you can be embracing and healing that aspect in yourself, which then when you encounter that person that is that aspect in yourself, you already know that person because you've encountered it inside yourself. And so then you're able to empathize with that person and others. So I just think that's an important thing to be aware of and to make that connection. Feels valuable. Okay, we got some people here. So does anybody have anything they'd like to ask? Any questions, any reflections that they'd like to share? Yeah, Chriselle.
Hi.
Hello, Chriselle.
Um, so I was actually just having this conversation with my husband Ryan the other day, as far as basically in terms of whatever's going on in the Middle East right now. And I almost feel like really guilty and bad about it because I don't know. And because I'm not paying attention to this side or this side, whatever. I'm really not paying attention to anything. I just know there's stuff going on. So, in a way, I feel like by me not putting my attention to it, I know it's horrible and awful that's going on, but by me putting my attention to it is just raising that frequency of that. So I I feel like, please, I'm on the phone. Please stop. I'm sorry.
No worries. I've been there.
No, I don't know right now. I'm sorry. Um, and so what you were, I don't remember where it was where you were saying about like just kind of we're all doing the same thing. So I feel like by me not paying attention to it, not putting my attention to, again, whatever's going on, I'm doing like, do you get what
Okay,
I'm trying to say?
I have something to say about that. It's not so much that you, by paying attention to it, you energize a bad thing. It's more that what the news tells us is important is based on a certain understanding of how the world works. It encodes values and it encodes a worldview. It encodes a theory of change. It encodes a theory of causality. Whoever runs the news, the culture of the news says this is important and that isn't important. Why is something important? Well, because it will have an effect on many, many people, a big effect on the future, and something isn't important if it's kind of confined to the small personal realm. So the things that most people pay attention to most of the time are by definition unimportant from the perspective of the news. But I think that there's very good reason to reject what the news and the culture of the news and really our whole culture believes is important and believes isn't important. There are other ways to order the world, other systems of cause and effect, other understandings of cause and effect. Like, for example, I know some people who are connected to African wisdom lineages. And some of those people think that the most important thing going on right now is the shepherding of lost souls back to the land of their ancestors. And like, this is what you should be paying attention to, that this is what's really going to change the future. Because if they can't get back to the land of their ancestors, they're going to make trouble everywhere.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's not in the news. There aren't news articles about that. Or maybe, like, I feel like each of us has an inner guidance system that tells us where our attention should be put. That inner guidance system is called, what do you actually care about? Politicians and the news can imply that you should care about this and not that. But I don't believe them. I believe the inner guidance system that might say the most important thing I could do right now is to visit my father. He's 85. And He's actually doing pretty well, but there was a health scare. Who knows? And I'm like, I really want to go visit my dad. I don't know if I'll ever have the chance again. Now, in what universe is that going to change the course of world events? In what universe is that more important than writing something about the threat of nuclear war in hopes of, forestalling Armageddon in the Middle East? Well, actually, in the real universe, it is more important. How do I know that? Because I care about that more. I don't think that the healing of this world comes from winning a war against ourselves. I think it actually is the other way around. I think it comes from more deeply trusting where our love and care take us. And sometimes, depending on where you are located in life, maybe your love and care do take you toward political activism of some kind. But that doesn't mean that work is more important than the invisible, to most people, invisible work, care, love that you devote to your family, to your loved ones, to your garden, to um, anything else. Because basically, modernity's understanding of the world is woefully deficient. We don't really understand what's going on here. There's so much more. And recent revelations like around UFOs, around like the telepathy tapes, like all kinds of stuff is coming into our sphere now that says, yeah, we didn't understand anything. So why should we trust the ordering of what is important if our entire cosmology is narrow and distorted and wrong?
Yeah, that term, the attention economy comes to mind. Like it feels like the news, like their objective is to get ratings, to have their commercials get seen, and it's just whatever gets your attention, gets you outraged, gets you afraid. I think that's only one component of it. I think there's deeper things going on too, but that's definitely one component is um, trying to get your attention, and your the more, social media, same thing, right? Get your attention, and then you make money off of people's attention. So it's kind of like whatever gets your attention sort of starts to happen. It doesn't really matter so much what the integrity of that is, it feels like. Anybody else want to share anything? Gio, you have anything you want to share?
Um, I think what you said about the attention economy, I would also call it the distraction economy because I think distracting people from, as you were saying, Charles, like, taking care of your father or like just doing things in a community basis and like coming together. Because I think the more people are distracted, the more they're caught in this us versus them mentality, the less that they can actually be in community with each other and look past these things that they're just being told on a screen. Because like a lot of the stuff that people believe would go away if they just spent more time with other people and they actually like, got off of the internet and got off of the news and got off of social media and like was in person just being with people. But I think because, what was that one movie? I think on Netflix, it was like the Social Dilemma or something like that.
Mm.
Where it basically talked about how, people get in such these uh narrow like echo chambers of belief systems, and they're so like, their ideologies become so just narrow and not open to any other ideas and just very narrow-minded. And I think a lot of that would just go away if people spent less time distracted, less time, feeding into this system. I think that's what keeps that sort of system running, that system of division and us versus them. is the fact that people are so distracted. And, I think it does serve an agenda of people who want it to be that way, who want us to be distracted from just being with each other. Because I think that's where a lot of like the real healing is not relying so much on like these authority figures to do things for us, and more so, coming into community together. Um, but yeah, that was just something I thought of when you said that.
And why do you think people are so easily distracted?
I think people are easily distracted because there is a lot of pain and suffering in the world. And when you can distract yourself from that, it's easier to not face that. And I think it's partially like just a thing of like this is people's personal experience, but I also think that there is a system that contributes to that pain and suffering. And it's kind of cyclical because it's like, you get distracted and then you don't face those problems and you don't address those problems. And then you're able to more easily be manipulated and more
But what about
easily.
people who are distracted to the pain and suffering, like doom scrolling?
Well, I think that also is a form of escaping your pain because you can doom scroll and that can be a distraction from whatever, like, sometimes it's not even pain, sometimes it's just boredom, or it's like a lack of meaning.
Yeah.
And that's also you could also distract yourself from that because it might not be like painful, but it can be very meaningless, very boring, maybe just very nihilistic. And I
Yeah.
think people want to distract themselves from not having any clear direction or like like clear meaning, like maybe they don't have clear idea of like, what meaning is in their life. What purposeful things can they do in their life? And I think a lot of ways the world can kind of create that like nihilism and create that lack of meaning. But also, some people just it's easier to just scroll instead of like thinking like, oh, do I have a purpose? Do I have a mission? Do I have, is there some way I can serve others, Um, and again, it could also just be a way for other people to have control over people too, I think.
I always try to understand things without recoursing to a judgment that someone is, weak or lazy or bad or doing something wrong. So in the case of being easily distracted, I kind of go where you were going with it. Someone's easily distracted if where they already are is uncomfortable. If you're doing something that you love and you're, having a great time, you're not easily distracted. So if people are very easily distracted, that means that they are um, kind of like you said, in some kind of pain, some kind of discomfort. When I'm doing something I hate, when I'm bored, when I'm doing something tedious, then almost anything can distract me. So what is it that makes, and boredom even itself actually, um, what is boredom? Boredom is the feeling of discomfort from not having anything to distract you, to entertain you. Entertainment is also a key concept here because, to entertain a guest is to bring a guest into your home. So if you're being entertained by, the television or something, you're being brought out of yourself. You're being entertained by this box. So this discomfort with just being is a key feature of the modern self that did not used to exist. People, hunter gatherers, were never bored. They would, I mean, I've read, accounts of this. They are just like my dog. My dog is content to just sit there doing nothing for hours. people used to be like that too. The word boredom I don't think it even entered the English language, until a few hundred years ago. The word interesting also is fairly recent in its current usage. So there's something about the modern way of life that makes it uncomfortable to exist. And I think I know what it is. It's very deep. And yeah, I mean, we could talk about trauma, we could talk about all kinds of things. But on the basic level, it is uncomfortable to exist as a modern self because we don't have the fullness of relationship that most human beings have had on this earth. And that makes us feel like we are even here. This would be kinship relations, your typical 16th century villager, let's say, almost anywhere in the world, was surrounded by hundreds of people, each of whom he or she knew intimately and knew that person intimately. Like everybody you saw, you knew their story. You knew their grandparents' story. You knew where their parents met. You knew everything, and you were known also. And you knew everything about, like, every tree, every plant, you knew its name, you knew its use, every animal, you knew its habits. There were stories about all of them. Every feature of the land was an intimate acquaintance. So we were connected in like this web of being, this web of relationship. And that, as society became more and more monetized and relationships became more and more mediated by markets and technology, these relationships shriveled up. Until now, like, I barely know my neighbors here in this neighborhood. I know them a little bit, but like, I don't know their stories. They haven't told me their stories, and I haven't heard the stories of some neighbors from other neighbors. In a village, in a tribe, people are talking about each other all the time. Now the stories we get are, about people that we've never met and never will meet. There's a lot of stories about Donald Trump. There's a lot of stories about Taylor Swift. There's a lot of stories about Iran, and Benjamin Netanyahu. There's a lot of stories about Vladimir Putin. We've never met those people. So when we're distracted by stories like that, political stories, celebrity stories, sports stories, that it temporarily alleviates the pain of our disconnection. Disconnection from people, disconnection from nature. And we will continue to be easily distracted until we rebuild those relationships. And that's a long journey, and it's not easy, because what am I going to do? Like, go to my neighbor's house, say, hey, I'd like to get to know you. Well, you don't have to do that in a functioning village, or tribe. Everybody's already doing that. They have to help each other. They do it to live, not just to survive, but to produce the things that make life good. They sing together. They dance together. They play games together. They take care of the children together. They build together. They hunt together. They do everything together, because that's the way you do it. We don't do that, and it's not because we are stupid. It's because an economy has developed over centuries that assigns us into very narrow roles, job descriptions, that only make sense in a global economy. I don't work with my neighbor. My neighbor is a real estate assessor, and I'm a writer. Like, there's nothing for us to do together. So we are deep in it, my friends. We're deep in the territory of separation. And we have entered it with a mission. It's not that we did bad things in a past life, and so now we're, put into this world of hellish separation that makes it hurt just to exist. We're here to redeem it. We're here to participate in the reunion of this world, to rebuild all of these structures of relationship as agents of healing, as agents of redemption. It's not a small task. There's no quick fix for it. And I think we have to accept a kind of a grief, to acknowledge that, yeah, there is something missing. There is a reason why I'm distracted. There is a reason why it is uncomfortable to be. What a human being should have, I do not have. But I volunteered for this, and I will contribute to restoring what has been lost. And I think that for me, as I recognize the universality of this mission, and that each person is born into a specific corner, a specific configuration of separation, and therefore has a unique path of return, then I'm much better able to see everybody as a comrade. And, the more deep they're in it, the more they attract judgment as being an awful person, the more I admire them. Because I'm like, wow, you really signed up for a big task to heal from what you experienced. That's a great soul. It's kind of ironic, that those who seem the worst of us have actually taken on the biggest task. Those who have tremendous, abuse and trauma to heal from. I respect them quite a lot for choosing to incarnate so far away from source. Like, yeah, you're pretty brave to take on this particular journey.
It feels like, Charles, like part of the practically this is getting off the screen. It feels like because I'm hearing two things, two prominent things is connecting more with each other in person, and connecting more with nature. Feels like those are two of the primary relationships. So it feels like do you feel like that's part of it, is like having more face-to-face contact with people, having more, metaphorically speaking, face-to-face contact with nature?
I think the step toward return is unique to each person. Yeah, it could be what comes up for you could be to engage the living beings around you more, the people around you more, or it could actually also be spiritual beings.
Yeah, for sure. That's
Yeah.
definitely
So
probably the most important.
yeah, different things come up in different times of your journey.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I can't say what it is for any specific individual.
sure. Yeah, just what I'm hearing you saying though is part of this is local community, creating local community, with the beings that are directly around you. That's seems
There
like
has to be a reason, though. There has to be
Exactly.
something to give and something to receive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Otherwise, you get together with your neighbors and you're kind of like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
I don't really need you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. yeah, shared purpose. They would go back to
People, like I was
Gio's
just in
point.
Asheville, North Carolina, and hearing stories about the hurricane. I mean, people were, knocking at each other's doors, asking, do you need anything, sharing whatever they had. Some people have generators, some people have a barbecue, cooking food, some people had water. Like, people had something to give that that others needed, which ordinarily, when the economy is functioning and technology is functioning, is not the case. So it's not so simple as just, okay, go get to know your neighbors. You have to find what's yours to give. And maybe or maybe not, your neighbors. I mean, there might be something, I'd like to, if I see my neighbors leaving town, I'll offer to take the garbage cans out. There's small things. But like I said, we're deep in it, and there's really no quick fix. But yeah, I think, getting off screens. I mean, at some point, you realize that the distractions have become even more uncomfortable than what you are escaping. This is the pattern of addiction. At first, the addiction works beautifully. You feel terrible, you get drunk, you feel good. Then you feel terrible again, so you do what worked last time. Get drunk. You feel great, having a great time. Next day, hangover, and now you're late for work, and your boss chews you out. Get drunk that night, feel great. Pretty soon you lose your job, feel even worse. What do? Do what worked last time, you get drunk. So at some point, though, the alcohol is causing more pain than it's alleviating. And, that's called hitting bottom. There's many levels of bottom, but each one of those crises is an opportunity to, drop the addiction. Yeah, I just so much of the kind of common sense, like conventional wisdom, encodes a war against the self. When we say, well, it would really be easy to do something or other, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do the hard thing. Well, why is easy bad and hard good? Why do we accept that?
But maybe could it be possibly because of the addiction though? Like the addiction makes things that would be simple hard, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, at some point, the distractions are no longer appealing. And maybe a process has ripened where you are ready to face what you had been distracted from.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are reaching that point. They're like, okay, it's time to get serious.
Yeah. Jacob, are you available to speak? I wanted to share, you had a story about your daughter and she was in Helene, where you guys were in Helene. If I recall, he told me the story about they had the power out. The power got knocked out for. You here, Jacob?
Yeah, here.
Yeah, you remember you told me the story about how the power was knocked out and Scarlett, your daughter, the power came back on in a few days. And didn't she start crying because she liked it better when the power was out?
Yeah, so we had a lot of fun. I guess that's maybe not the right word to use, but a lot of people struggled. And anyways, hello everybody, good to be here. Hi, Charles. I'm Jacob.
Hi, Jacob.
Nice to be here with you, like what you're talking about. I feel a lot of similarities with what you're sharing. A lot of what you're sharing resonates with me and my experience and kind of what I feel within myself. And so, yeah, we lost power for 5 days, and there was no cell phones and no, tablets and TVs and no internet connection or data or anything like that. And so we had, fortunately, really been preparing throughout the year prior to Helene for like camping and hiking. And so I had all this cook stoves and food and everything in excess. And, dinner was cooked on a little Coleman camp stove, in one skillet. And we have all of these really amazing older, like early century oil lamps. And we have probably a dozen of them. So we had lights in our home. Every room had a little oil lamp. And we played Uno and board games around a little oil lamp and just had an amazing time as a family. Like generally, I'm gone busy working, and Haley, my partner, is busy, taking care of the house and the kids. And, I have a 14-year-old son, and he's on his computer, like designing video games and playing video games. And, Scarlett is either crafting or, on a tablet or a device of some sort. And it was a beautiful time to really connect as a family without all that stuff. And it was like a remembering. It's like being present in the moment without all the distractions. And I think humanity as a whole used to be. So I've been having this experience. I had this experience this morning where I was in like a deep connection with God, with my creator, that I was just very present. And I've been very present over the weekend, last weekend. And, I noticed that I'm experiencing a breath and a stretch, like in my morning practice, from a place of like amazement and wonder. And it feels like from the place of nothingness, like before there was any existence at all. And now here I am breathing and stretching, and I'm feeling all this stuff in my body. And it feels like God's awareness of my experience is like a direct connection. And I think, just looking out at the sky and the trees and the clouds, I went on a walk after that this morning, and I'm just looking, and I'm just like, wow, in amazement. And, you mentioned earlier, the dog can just sit and be fine for hours. Doesn't need to be distracted. It doesn't need something to do. And I think humanity used to do that. We used to be in union with God, and we used to just be in awe and wonder of a storm rolling in, or the leaves on the trees blowing in the wind, and all this simple stuff, the clouds, and just the warm sun on your face, and all this stuff that nobody notices anymore. And I think that's like that's key to my daughter's experience of having such an amazing time being in the present moment, just fixing food and playing a card game and being with the family. Everything we did was together, and anywhere we went, we were together, and around the house together. And power came back on, lights are on, the oil lamps went out. It's like she got really upset, and she did cry, and she's like, I want the power to go back out. This was fun. And Haley, my partner, suggested, we haven't done this, but talking about it now, it seems like, maybe a very important thing that we should do is flip the main breaker off once a week and just have a day and a night, spending time together. And with our neighbors, we were talking to our neighbors. We got to know our neighbors that we had never met in 2 or 3 years that they've lived beside us. and helping each other out, giving food, and I had a generator over here running power cords to their house so they could run their coffee pot and charge their phones. And yeah, so the distractions, I don't know if it's I think it's just it's not something that was meant for like malice or anything. I think it's just kind of where we've ended up. But it's hurting humanity, I feel like, just further separating, our connection to God, our connection to just like feeling the breeze blow on our back or the sunshine on our face, or just a simple conversation with somebody in our community. I think all the distractions are just further separating us from really just the simplicity of being a human. Like, we're here as humans, and
Yeah.
I'm wanting to fully experience being a human.
Mhm. I love that
And
story.
yeah,
Yeah, I love what you're saying. Um, just to take delight in creation, like you were describing after your experience of connection with God and going out and, the wind on your face, the sounds of the birds, everything is a gift,
yeah,
that you take it in, and the presence of your loved ones, to just the company of those that you love. These simple things are a delight. And it takes maybe the power going out to clear away the distractions and to reveal what's always been available and what we didn't really know was missing, like, why do I feel uncomfortable? Why am I so craving distraction? Like, what's going on here? Oh, now I know. Here's what it actually feels like to be human fully. To be human fully means to be in full relationship, and to to exist is to be in relationship. And I guess, like, I mean, there are people who they find God even in solitary confinement in a cement prison. I don't want to say that's impossible, but God is not only, some remote spirit. God is in all things. So really, anytime that you take delight in creation, you're also connecting with God. And I love this, like, stories like the one you just told us. I'm grateful for stories like that, because I mean, I could talk about these things conceptually, but your story transmits an experience, and I'm sure it's touched everybody and reminds us of, like, oh yeah, I want to be human also. I want to receive the gifts of creation also. And I want to contribute to creation and give others the gift of my presence and my
mm,
companionship.
Beautiful. Okay, Antonio's got a question, looks like, and then after that, maybe we start to wind it down.
Um, Hi. It's actually not a question. I just wanted to take advantage of this and say thank you to Charles and to you, of course, for inviting Charles. I just and mention for me, well, the first time I knew about you or was with the gathering of the tribe, and so I did want to bring that up because that it hit me at a very, synchronistic time. And I mean, I bawled like a child. I saw that movie when I saw that, seeing something that, because it described exactly what happened to me, that first awakening and then going back to sleep. And so to see that something so personal, so deeply personal, to see it laid out. In fact, you were talking a little later, something earlier as I was remembering it. And so I wanted to just say thank you for not just that, for everything that that you bring here now, for being here now, because that short film really, really, like, it hit me. in understanding that, like what it said at the end, you're not alone, and because I have been quite alone, and so I just wanted to take advantage of this and say thank you for that and for everything else that you bring, because that it really connected with the gathering of the tribe. I really, really connected with it. It just hit me. It was like it's like that whole thing was talking about my personal experience, and it just blew me away. So, for those of you, if you're listening, if you have not seen the gathering of the tribe, go watch it. It's a very, very powerful, and it just that cosmic connection, that connection to our kin in higher realms. Just very powerful. So I just wanted to take advantage of this moment and say thank you for that, Senor Charles.
Okay. Well, thank you, Antonio. I appreciate. Yeah, that film was really just kind of a animated accompaniment to a story that I wrote, and that story is the last chapter of The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. And it's just, yeah, maybe I won't tell the story now, because I would have to tell a short version of it. And, telling about a story isn't as good as the story itself. So I'll leave it to people to look it up if they haven't seen it before.
So that's the final chapter of a book you wrote?
Yeah.
What's the name of the book?
The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible.
Okay, I'll definitely look that up, because
Yeah.
that and again, that just like I said, I just bawled like a baby when I saw that described, because that's exactly how it happened to me. I had that first spark was in when I was 23,
Yeah.
back in 92, 93, and then go back to sleep, go back. But now with that, like everything's wrong. Like now you could see it, you could see it, and so yeah, and
Yeah.
we are here now. So yeah, thank you for that and for everything else. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was it. Actually, if
Sorry,
I may add,
I didn't realize I was muted. All right, sorry about that. Go ahead, Antonio.
yeah, just on the tangent here, going back to the first what you guys were discussing about left and right. I just wanted to throw that in there. I don't think the Dems have been left for a very long time. Like you said, 20 years. I consider them center. I'm from Mexico, so we were able to like put in a real leftist government, a couple administrative, like a humanist. The saying of our former president is, for the good of the country, first the poor. So in Mexico right now, we've had a true leftist, humanist, democratic government. So anyway, I just wanted to say the Dems are not left; they are center, and that's all I'll say about that.
Charles, anything you want to share before we part ways here? Any final words of wisdom?
I don't know. Words of wisdom sets a pretty high bar.
I know. I set you up there. Any words of non-wisdom or wisdom?
Let me see if there's anything I want to say. Well, I guess I've never met most of you. In fact, let me just swipe over here and see. Okay, there's a few little, just like 7 or 8 people on this call. Yeah, and maybe more people will listen to the recording.
Yeah, for sure.
So I've never met most of you, and I guess I wish and pray that this isn't just another distraction.
Nice.
But that there's some kind of connection, that makes you feel more here, even though you've been, listening to a digital recording, but something that makes you feel more here, a feeling of some kind of companionship. As if we are these sparks that have been cast very far from the fire, and they're just kind of floating around. But when they see each other, they remember the fire from whence they came. And just like maybe this is like a glimpse, just a glimpse of another spark. So that's my wish. And yeah, thank you, Brian, for convening us.
Beautiful words. Those were words of wisdom. That's my judgment, even though we don't judge here, but that's my perspective. Those were words of wisdom. I appreciate that. Really beautiful. And thank you for being here. And anywhere you want to point people to stay connected to you or plug into what you're up to.
You can find me on the internet.
Yeah, and I would say his Substack is really great. There's some really great essays on there, and that's a great place to stay connected with Charles. So yeah, thank you again, Charles. Thanks everybody. And
thank you.
good night.
Bye-bye.